Star Trek, to those of us in it, has become a way of life.
I'm very proud of Star Trek. I think it was an amazing piece of entertainment.
When I got this part, people said to me, you know, Star Trek is going to be in your life now for your whole life.
The special effects and things that were done in that movie, to this day, you know, that ship, you know, flying in, seeing it in its dry dock and the things that they were just breathtaking.
It's hard to remember now that Star Trek was legendary then, but in a different way. There were only the episodes of the TV series.
Star Trek: The Motion Picture is perhaps the first movie made because millions of fans demanded it. The journey from television show to the silver screen is a story of courage, perseverance, and imagination as unique as any voyage of the Starship Enterprise.
There had been a lot of talk during since the demise of the series about bringing it back, doing something as it slowly gained in popularity, the series did.
Star Trek had been going on for several years as a TV series. It was very successful, and at a certain point, Paramount decided to make a feature out of it.
We went from a TV series that we were going to do to a B-level movie, you know, a low-budget film. And then with the sudden explosion of Star Wars and success that had, Paramount people started looking at each other and saying, well, what do we have like that? And what do we have that we can exploit like Star Wars? And somebody in the back of the room said, I think we have something called Star Trek.
I actually was working at the time, not for the movie company, but for Paramount Television Service. I moved back into feature film production.
Jeffy came to see me one day and said, how about if I help you out on Star Trek? And I said, well, what do you want to do? He said, well, I'll do all the post-production and the special effects and all those production issues. You know, you continue to do all the creative relationships and, you know, developing the script, working with Bob Wise and Gene.
It fell to Jeffrey largely to be the studio's representative on the film. And it was Jeffrey's baby in that regard. He's a very passionate person, and he, I think, embraced making that movie almost like as a love affair, as a director does.
My job was to sort of corral everybody and, you know, supervise the development and you know, try and get a team put together to make the movie.
But putting together that team was not as easy as it appeared.
Leonard DeForest and me, we had a really intimate bond that would not have been there had it not been for Star Trek. I was shocked that Leonard didn't want to be in it.
They wanted everybody, all the originals back.
One of the problems we had was with Leonard Nimoy, who said he's never going to put these ears on again, you know. So the first script that we had on it, that Alexei and me didn't have the Nimoy character in it.
To relaunch Star Trek and not, you know, have Leonard Nimoy is to buy a car and not have wheels. It just seemed impossible and illogical.
We had to go to see him and talk to him about it and convince him it was the thing to do.
I was, I guess, sort of given the mission of trying to at least open the doors or make the first approach to it. And the only thing that I, you know, remember in the details is being in a restaurant in New York City on my knees begging.
I offer my services as science officer.
So the only one that I was involved in terms of casting was Steve Collins to play Decker.
Every young actor in Hollywood had been up for the film and had really been dying to get it. And I think it really helped me get the part because I walked in for the meeting and, you know, it was just a part to me. I mean, I was much more interested in meeting Robert Wise than I was in the thought of doing Star Trek.
I think I made a test of Steve and decided he was the best one to play Decker and be in the film.
I read for Bob, and by the time I got home, they'd made an offer. It was lightning fast, and I think we were shooting within 10 days.
Hello, Ilea.
Decker.
Persis Khabat had already been cast for the role before I came on it.
Stephen Collins and Persis Khamvada, I thought, were wonderful in the picture. And, you know, the two of them kind of stood in contrast to the original cast.
Persis was very, very sweet, obviously incredibly beautiful, a very gentle person who I think was a little overwhelmed by Hollywood.
One of the big emotional times when we had to take her over to makeup and get her hair all taken off, you know, because she was bald in the film. And it was very emotional. She was almost crying as this lovely black hair was chopped off and she was finally scraped down into having her bald head.
She had to come in every morning, and it took about an hour and a half to 2 hours to make up her head, because all that skin had to be made up. Plus, they had to shave it back, and she was always patient, always just a real pro about that very difficult process.
With casting complete, the challenge of bringing Star Trek to life as a motion picture fell to the brilliant director Robert Wise.
Bob is the kind of director that works subtly, doesn't say, now here's what I want you to do. He generally allows you to find it because he has worked on the script long enough to get the script good enough that it becomes actor-proof.
The opportunity to work with Robert Wise will always remain a high point in my career.
I think what Bob brings to a film is that he inspires people to do their best work they possibly can do.
I'd say the word savior would be the word I would kind of comes to mind. You know, Bob, who came with, you know, just extraordinary credentials and, you know, and expertise is what really made it into a movie.
With a reunited cast, led by a visionary director, almost everything was in place, and spirits were high as production commenced.
We had 2 acts of a 3-act screenplay. Literally, we had 2 acts of a 3-act screenplay.
In order to make the release date that they wanted at the end of the year, we had to start shooting on the film before we had a final script all the way through.
Any man who could manage such a feat, I would not dare to disappoint.
When I started on the film, we got all the cast together on the spaceship and the cabin there, and I said to them, I'm very pleased to be here and in the midst of such legends.
I like the idea of the reunification of the old crew, and I think I wrote a couple of good scenes.
The day we actually got on the set, it was really one of the most remarkable moments I've had in this business and certainly in my career. Kirk comes out of the elevator, and Uhura, Sulu, and Chekhov run forward to him, you know, beaming. This was just an amazing moment. I thought, my God, this is really happening.
If you look at Star Trek the Motion Picture, you see that each one of the actors is given his moment as he comes back in.
Why, it's Mr. Spock.
And that was something that was deeply, deeply important to Gene.
I always felt like I was playing with somebody else's bat, ball, and glove in someone else's neighborhood, you know? Because Star Trek was theirs, and I was this sort of invader. And some of that really helped in terms of the part I played. And because I was supposed to be this outsider who they had to have along on the trip because Decker knew the ship now better than Kirk did.
Stop competing with me, Decker.
Permission to speak freely, sir?
Granted.
Sir, you haven't logged a single star hour in 2.5 years. That plus your unfamiliarity with the ship's redesign, in my opinion, sir, seriously jeopardizes this mission.
I trust you will nursemaid me through these difficulties, mister.
Yes, sir, I'll do that.
Many of the people involved with it had a long history with the project from the TV show and had certain conceptions of who their characters were and what their various roles should be in the film.
Leonard is very imaginative, very creative, and I had my hand in writing at that point. And so we were in on some of the story meetings.
The actors all had their own idea. They'd been playing these roles for so long that they'd read the pages as they came up and say, well, I wouldn't say this, or I'd say that. So we had to keep rewriting till we finally got a version each time that all the actors were agreed with. I was getting so many changes every day that we had to put a time on them, not just the date, but the time.
Leonard would come to my house at 9 o'clock after dinner every night, and we'd go over the next day's pages.
Leonard, I think, was the creator, certainly, of the tear sequence, a single tear. Leonard also helped substantially in the creation of the very short scene that explained Picture's point of view, where he said,
Picture must evolve. Its knowledge has reached the limits of this universe, and it must evolve. What it requires of its God Doctor is the answer to its question, is there nothing more?
For Star Trek to make the leap from a television program to a major motion picture, the filmmakers would have to create a whole new enterprise.
When I came on, these TV series had these little tiny kind of models for the spaceship, and that's one thing that bothered me. And I said, now that we were going on the big screen to make a feature on it, we needed to have a good full-size model. So they made a model of the exterior of it all. I think it was about 9 feet long, big enough that I could take the camera, go around and deliver it. You know, go around, shoot around, and go up and shoot this part of it and that part of it, the other part of it, because I had a big enough model.
I think I would have built them at a little larger scale than they did. It would have been much more comfortable shooting. We had to commission a special periscope lens system in order to get the lens close enough to the model to get the angles we wanted. So the periscope was about 3 feet out in front of the lens to kind of sneak in under the nacelle or between the wings or whatever and get the angles. We wanted to have enough lights on board the ship to where it would look like it could light itself up. You'd have a little light coming out of the fuselage shining up on the wing that was supporting this nacelle that was the thruster, with lights inside those. If you assume that a spaceship is kind of in the solar system, the sun is there somewhere, so you've got a key light. And I said, well, in this movie, we're nowhere in the solar system. There is no sun. And the source of illumination, I think, has to be the Enterprise itself. Once we had justified it with a few little lights shining on itself, then we felt we could, well, we'll put about 10 times as many little flecks of light as though they're sources of light, which are completely fake. But we came up with a very simple technique of just shining one big light into a big cluster of little dental mirrors, little mirrors about 1 inch in diameter on a little swivel, and you could just take that one light and turn it into 50. And so it gave all these little flecks, which gave it scale, because there's no one big light, there should be hundreds of small lights.
As filming continued, the look of the movie, achieved through production design and cinematography, would be key to the film's success.
Harold I had worked with on a number of films before as a production designer, along with Boris Levin I used many times. So when the chance came to do the show, I brought Harold on because I had experience with him and I knew he'd do a very good job.
Because there was a time limit, there was a release date. I had a design for this while they were writing. I had the problem of saying how much of this ship was finished before they were called for this emergency to get out of the dry dock and head out.
She needs more work, sir. A shakedown.
Mr. Scott, an alien object of unbelievable destructive power is less than 3 days away from this planet. The only starship in interception range is the Enterprise. Ready or not, she launches in 12 hours.
I designed a clear plastic or plexiglass engine, so I didn't know what the power was that was powering this thing, and they put this lighting in it, and I had a long tube going back towards the tail of the ship. I went ahead and made it in forced perspective, which means smaller and smaller and smaller. There was a ramp on the side where we had a 5-foot man and 3-foot a young boy, and so it looked much bigger than it was. When
this film came up, my first thought was to get Dick Klein on to be my cinematographer because I'd liked working with him so much on the Andromeda Strain.
We didn't have the tools of the trade that now exist that make it much easier to do a film in a confined area. Nobody really knew what post-production was going to do. They didn't know either. They were magnificent in developing whatever they did under the circumstances, but we had to put reactive lighting on people. If it was a flaring effect, we'd have to put, to make it look natural, a reactive light on the set or the actors. So we were really guessing a lot of that.
It was my first encounter with blue screen. You have to somehow communicate that which the audience would see, and they are assuming that you're seeing it. You're not seeing anything.
It was very difficult. They had to look at this view screen and I didn't have anything on it to show them. So I had to talk them through it. I had to describe what I thought was going to be on that screen so they could react to that.
You had to depend an awful lot on what Mr. Wise would be telling you was happening, or what you were supposedly seeing.
They would take a piece of paper and they'd say, okay, here's the monster. Monster's right over here, over your right shoulder.
We'd be looking at an X, you know, on a light stand. Somebody would just tape an X like that. Look there, and someone might be moving it around so that our eye line would change, you know, like this.
Now, when I snap my finger, look at it as though it's going to eat you. Now, we don't know exactly what it looks like or how it's going to eat you, or what it says or what it does and how it looks, nor how it blinks its eyes, nor where it moves its legs and its arms and its ears. And it really doesn't have ears, that much we know. So, react. That's acting in a science fiction film.
The fact that also there was a lot of silver in the set made it very difficult because of the reflectiveness of it. It would pick up the blue screen. And so that's why we would have a lock-off, shoot the actors in front of the blue screen, and then turn off the blue screen so that Doug Trumbull and his group could now, I guess you call it rotoscoping in this case, where you could actually now frame out the bleed, if there was a bleed, of the blue screen coming through. Pictiure itself was a challenge, too, because it didn't have a lot of life to it. It really was a static object. We had to add life to it, and it was done through the acting and Bob's direction and different colored lights we used to make it interesting.
With film production already underway and the release date set in stone, all the filmmakers needed was an ending.
We had trouble solving the end of the picture.
We really did want to do something that was very big and very special and took us to some place that was new for features. There's some place that Star Trek could take us that was unique to Star Trek.
I think it was me who solved the jigsaw puzzle. And I said, if we do this, then we get there, and we go there, and then we get this. And Leonard said, that's great. You got to tell it to Bob Wise. So we immediately asked Bob to leave the set, come into an office, and I performed this idea now the second time. And I said, if we do this and we do that, we get that, we get that. And Bob said, that's great. Now you've got to do that for Gene Roddenberry. So sometime later, we got Gene Roddenberry in the room, and now I'm about to do my third performance of the day. I must have been tired because I was doing another performance on screen, because I didn't do it quite as well, and it wasn't quite as impressive to Gene as it had been to Bob and to Leonard. Gene said, well, I don't know, I've got to think about that. And he thought about it long enough so that he didn't do it. Whatever it was, I've forgotten what it was.
The creator line was in there, had been in there all along. The Pictiure wants to was seeking its creator. I came up with the notion that it was trying to catch its creator, that it wanted to evolve, that it wanted to evolve its consciousness and join with the creator.
Each of us, at some time in our lives, turns to someone, a father, a brother, a God, and asks, why am I here? What was I meant to be? Pictiure hopes to touch its creator.
With time running out, and to make the film's delivery date, the production schedule was tightened.
Bob Wise was under pressure. The actors don't really feel that pressure, and for two reasons. One is it isn't their job, and secondly, it really is the job of management to keep that pressure away.
We had to push like mad to get the film done.
Bob Wise is a brilliant director, and he knows exactly what he wants. And by the time I came along, the movie was almost finished. The bulk of main unit shooting had been completed, and even a lot of shooting on effects sequences had been performed, kind of waiting for post-production.
Somebody finally sat down, I think it was me, with Jeffrey Katzenberg and Lindsley Parsons and said, there's only 280 working days left if we work Saturdays and Sundays, and there's 525 shots. What do we do?
There was nothing to cut to. There was no way to get out of it because he expected the shots to be there.
The actors had reacted to a blue screen, and so it was, imagine, if you will, on the screen, something happening, and then react to it. So we had all these great reactions, people swallowing a lot or blinking their eyes in awe.
So he lined up his actors, he did all his reverses and his coverage and dialogue and everything, and you cut to the viewport or whatever the shot was, and boy, you'd better be there or you were you were in deep trouble. We did the whole V'ger cloud sequence going through the cloud, which is one of the most beautiful sequences I've ever worked on. And a woman named Alison Yerksa and a whole team of animators did that whole sequence of multi-plane exposures of airbrushed artwork. Each level was like only an inch apart from the other level, and a different shape and a different shape and a different shape, which would create these very complex, convoluted corridors of light. Nobody knew what the heck this cloud was supposed to look like.
It was defined in the script in words, but there was really no definition, no illustration that showed specifically what it was going to look like.
You know, it's easy to say cloud in a screenplay, but when you got to actually execute it, you know, it can't be just a cloud. It has to be something special.
The next leg of the journey could not be completed until Robert Wise recruited the right composer, Academy Award winner Jerry Goldsmith.
When we got to doing the score, and Jerry Goldsmith, who had done a marvelous score for me on Sampa, was going to do the score.
It's so exciting when you hear music come alive with an orchestra, a big orchestra on a scoring stage, and everybody gets thrilled and excited and all that. And Bob was mildly, and he smiled. And
I listened to the first couple of pieces, and it didn't seem quite right to me. It seemed like I got visions of sailing ships somehow.
the scene of the flying up to the Enterprise was a big bombastic piece, and we all thought it was so wonderful. And finished the sessions, and I'm patting myself on the back, and everybody's patting, it's great and all that. And
Bob grabbed me, pulled me out in the hallway. We walked down the hall. He said, well, what do you think? And I could never lie to Bob. I couldn't get away with it even if I wanted to. I mean, it's impossible. So I said, well, I think it sounds like, sailing ships. And he says, well, I think it sounds like Conestoga wagons. What do we do?
And he couldn't really articulate what was bothering him. He instinctually knew what was bothering him, but he couldn't say what was bothering him. So I said, we got to do that all over again. And so I was crushed.
Those were pretty frightening moments. Those are the type of moments where if you were going to start having a breakdown, that's when you were going to start doing it.
I said, well, what's bothering you? And he finally said, there's no theme. And I started thinking, theme? Oh, there's a love theme. I'd written the love theme. But I mean, there was no Star Trek theme. I said, oh.
Yeah, when we took a little break and Jerry went away, and while we were doing some more work on the film, and then he came back with his revised score.
He'd come over to the house and he had a bad day of the special effects, and he says, I've had a really bad day today. He says, nothing's working right. I hope you got good news for me. So I remember the head of the music department at Fox, at Paramount, was there then. And we had rehearsed this, and I had two pianos in the living room, and we played it for him on the two pianos. He says, that's it. It was like, why didn't you come up with that in the first place?
With principal photography completed, production executive Jeffrey Katzenberg had to oversee the completion of the film itself, a process that would take everyone right down to the wire.
That's true. He was a big help on the film. He was fairly new out here, I think it was the first picture that he had actually had anything to do with. And so he was very, very busy keeping everybody steamed up and keyed up about the film, and the fact that we had a release date and we had to get the film done. And he was very good and very effective at that.
I kept saying to myself, Jeffrey's going to become a very important person after this. And I remember getting phone calls from Jeffrey. He says, "How's it going, kid?" You know, and he's like the kid, like the cheerleader going on. We got to win this one for the Gipper and all that. And he was, and he was doing it with me. I'm sure he was doing it with everybody. And he had this indomitable spirit. This was going to get done, and he was going to see it got done.
The only thing I remember about that is that I actually put on 1,100 miles a week on my car for the last 4 weeks of post-production of it, of literally having Bob in the editing room, half starting at the crack of dawn at Paramount, going down to Doug Trumbull in Marina del Rey, the scoring of the movie on the Fox stage, John Dykstra out at by the Van Nuys Airport, doing the other half of the effects, and sort of making that loop around Los Angeles twice a day. Again, just sort of trying to be a cheerleader to, get everybody, moving along in it. I think I pretty much just spent my day in the car.
Everything was happening at the very last minute, and we would finish shots, and they would go into the lab and get cut in, and it was miraculous what actually got achieved.
We went so far down to the last minute where there's, again, the head of post-production at Paramount, this guy who's been there for now 35 years, Paul Hagar, who's just brilliant, literally took over a sound stage at MGM, and the entire stage was covered with 3,000 cans, all earmarked for theaters.
And as each reel was finished from the lab, it was rushed over, literally wet.
It looked like little gravestones. These huge container, the film containers, the metal boxes, and they were all lined up, and they were identified to go here and there.
There's this shot of all of these. The entire soundstage is filled with these cans, all pre-labeled, waiting for the last reel to be dropped in, with airplanes sitting on tarmacs waiting for these cans to arrive there. And I mean, it really was a Herculean effort.
That's the only film I think I ever made. I didn't have a sneak preview. Sneak preview is where you go out and try it out before it's finally buttoned up, but I didn't have the time for that, so we just had to button up Star Trek the Motion Picture. As I say, I took it to Washington.
We were sitting in the movie theater in Washington, the premiere having been held there. And the film was being put into the machine. It had literally come in a can under somebody's arm.
Matter of fact, I carried the print with me on the plane to Washington for the premiere.
Star Trek the Motion Picture went on to become a major box office success, generating multiple motion picture sequels, new television spin-offs, and a merchandising empire that thrives to this day. But out of the near superhuman efforts that went into creating this legendary motion picture event, emerged a team of filmmaking professionals whose careers would be forever changed by boldly going where no one had gone before.
I cherished the experience of working on Star Trek. After I finished the film, I said, well, if I can do that, I can do anything.
It was just an amazing opportunity to sort of be the point person for, one of the great properties, of that time. That franchise has a value that is measured in billions for, the company. Wouldn't have happened without that first Star Trek film. It literally is the foundation on which this entire enterprise was built.
I've had a creative and full life as a result, a great deal as a result of Star Trek, and I'm forever grateful.